If you had to battle crazy spiritual monsters, what would you do? You would have to figure out how to beat a 300-year-old spiritual fox with the powers of Itachi, who is on a mission to steal your precious student's skull. And you would have to watch all your friends and precious students get trapped in a dangerous spiritual fog prison while trying to rid yourself of the evil spirit trying to take possession of your body. All because of a spiritual magnetic field. I'm gonna break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the Spiritual Disturbances in Jigoku Sensei Nube 2025. Nube here is the only teacher in Japan with psychic powers, and he takes up the job at his former high school. But while he's settling his credentials in the principal's office, his new students are facing a challenge that will soon become a full-blown war, and it's all because of this dude named Hiroshi. Hiroshi refuses to play nice even when his childhood friend Kyoko shows up, and they think he's just being mean. The real truth is much, much darker. They start the morning gossip about their new lecture, and when Nube shows up wearing a weird helmet, which he claims is for chasing away spirits, but he messes up his introduction and sets himself on fire. After dousing the fire, he introduces himself, and all the students can tell that he's simply a goofball. That's why they ask him to exorcise the spirit in the picture by the hallway. He indulges them and heads out to the passageway with a cruise of salt and makes a mockery of true exorcism, and that's what actually gets Hiroshi really mad. Meanwhile, another really cute teacher named Jigoku Sensei shows up and catches Nube messing up the picture in the hallway. When Nube informs her that she might be haunted herself, she gives him a nice slap. Hiroshi remembers his traumatic experiences with exorcists, and that's why Nube comes so close to him with his hands out. Hiroshi reacts on instinct and tries to punch Nube. Luckily, he throws a pretty quick punch, but Nube easily blocks it. That's when he runs off and things get really interesting. At the end of day one, Nube gives a review to the principal, and that's where he explains that although there's a lot of supernatural activity going on, he can't exorcise every ghost he comes across, so he decides to focus on building trust with his students first. At the same time though, Hiroshi knocks out a kid on the field, and later Hiroshi goes to see his father in the hospital, and it turns out he sent his father to the hospital with his own two hands. When he leaves the hospital, Kyoko is walking behind him. That's when she sees a strange, ghoulish thing stuck to it, but in a split second, it's gone. Kyoko reports to Nube, and Nube decides to look into it, but when Nube tries to talk to Hiroshi, Hiroshi smashes his seeing glass into Nube's face and runs off. And then in class, things get even worse. Hiroshi sees himself with ghoulish eyes for a split second, and when Kyoko tries to touch him, he hits her in the face. Kyoko falls on the edge of the wall and cracks her head. They rush her to the clinic and inform that Kyoko's fine. Nube apologizes and calls everything his mistake, so after they release Kyoko, he decides to take a walk with Hiroshi, but he doesn't realize that someone is watching from the shadows. On the way, he finds a child crying and uses an incantation to pull out a worm from the child's hand. He explains to Hiroshi that it is a tantrum worm, and it is the reason Hiroshi can't control himself, but instead Hiroshi absorbs the new worm and sends a psychic blast to Nube, causing him to go flying. Kyoko chases after him because she's a dum-dum, and when she gets too close to him, he's already been possessed by the ghoul, and he attacks Kyoko, and as you expect, doesn't go well. Nube shows up and uses some incantations with his summoning spell to free Kyoko. Hiroshi regains consciousness for a few minutes and cries out to Nube for help. That's when Nube releases his gloves from his left hand, but then the hand turns into a demon hand, and he punches Hiroshi in the stomach. But instead of Hiroshi's guts, a giant worm shows up. When it attacks Nube, he uses his demon hand to slice it from the inside out and leaves a demon mark burning the ground. This is so crazy to me because Nube knew what he was dealing with, and he did not act sooner. Like, Nube, first off, keep your powers and your love for the mystic arts a secret. Keep your mouth shut. One of the reasons why Hiroshi refused help from you is that he had already gotten help from a spiritist, and it didn't change anything. Now, sure, Nube, he doesn't know this, but it would have been a lot easier for him to help his students, you know, like a guardian angel from the shadows, instead of just trying to flaunt your abilities in front of everybody. Keep up the mystery. You could have prevented a phenomenon called the safety net effect. It happens when people are more prone to taking risks due to the presence of a strong figure that can protect or save them from adverse consequences. If she didn't know that Nube had spiritual powers, then she would have done a more logical action, like maybe run to the church or the exorcist place or not be there. If you kept your powers a secret, Nube, you could have intercepted Hiroshi, taken care of the worm problem on your own without anybody knowing. Instead of giving Anger's Issues boy a chance to get mad at everybody, how about you time the moment? Like when he's on his way home, take care of the monster, and then talk to the kid. Sure, he might be angry and upset at you, but it doesn't matter. He'll thank you for feeling so much better afterwards, so it's a risk, but the reward is great. And then, now you have another person who knows that you are definitely legit, and they're gonna treat you seriously. You can take care of monsters with your full abilities without having to look over your shoulder to worry worry about some dumb kid trying to help their friends. Now their victory is short-lived. While they're busy talking, this dude shows up, uses his sight, grabs Hiroshi, sends Nube flying, just so he could be alone with his target, Hiroshi. He makes some markings in the air, and by the time Nube shows up with Kyoko, he's gone. Nube tells Kyoko all about his demon hand, the whole deal. There's a demon sealed inside because he saved a child from a demon many years ago, and that's why he uses a demon hand to fight off evil spirits, you know, like fight fire with fire kind of thing. He tells her to go home, she resists, but in the end, agrees. Meanwhile, the doctor throws Hiroshi off a building and catches him just before he reaches the floor. And that's how he confirms that Hiroshi has been cured from his tantrum worm. And then Nube shows up and tries to bind the doctor, but the doctor uses his spear sight thing to burn off Nube's sealing paper, and that's when Nube realizes this battle's not going to be easy. And to make matters worse, the doctor puts Nube in some sort of genjutsu that makes him see the doctor and Hiroshi everywhere. But then he breaks out a crystal ball thing to take care of the genjutsu, and once he figures out what the doctor's plans are, he tries to use his Google map to get the next location. However, Nube is not really tech savvy and he doesn't even know how to use a freaking map. Luckily, Kyoko is a little bit more stubborn than she looks. She did not go home, and she grabs Nube's phone, sets up the map for him, and he tells her the doctor can't do anything to Hiroshi until he aligns something called the 7 Northern Stars. And Nube just happens to know the final destination, and since Kyoko knows the way around and can use a phone, she guides him to the location. But when he gets there, what he doesn't know is that he's in a genjutsu again. That's why he thinks Hiroshi's head has been cut off. He lets his guard down and gets pierced by the doctor's spear. And turns out the doctor's there is really not a doctor at all in any way, shape, or form, but a monster that came from another world looking for the perfect human skull to complete his sacrifice. And after living a whole fake life as a doctor to go through numerous skulls, he finally found Hiroshi, the perfect skull for his jutsu, you could say. After watching Hiroshi for a while, he planted his tantrum worms, and Hiroshi teed up all of his anger because anger could interrupt his humanification sacrifice. And now that Hiroshi is back to normal, Doctor knew it was time to carry out the sacrifice. The doctor uses the spear to poke himself and remove the fake human skull he had been using, and that's when he turns into a monster fox. He starts the ritual, and all the locations he's passed through started glowing with light. But when he tries to take Hiroshi's skull, Nube shows up and Hiroshi runs to him. Now Nube finally gets serious. He lets out his demon hand, and the monster's not phased though. Instead, he pulls out a Kage Bushin type move like he's Naruto, and because Nube can't tell the difference between the monster and the doppelgangers, he gets his butt handed to him. Meanwhile, Kyoko and Hiroshi break into a crane and use a magnet to end the monster's genjutsu by magnetizing all the metal balls he was using for it. And when he's the only one left, Nube attacks him head on and knocks him out with his demon hand. That's when the monster evaporates and Nube heads home with his kids. The next day, school goes on as usual, except there's a new rumor. There's an honor kid who spends every midnight in school solving problems and keeping the schools clean. And it all started when 3 kids see something really terrifying behind window curtains. When Nube shows up to school, he's tired because he's broke and salaries haven't been paid. All the sadness goes away though as soon as he spots Jigoku Sensei. That's about when one of his students gives him a rundown about the rumors concerning the midnight honor student. He brushes it off and sends them back to class. But because of that though, the students wait behind to check things out for themselves. And just when they spot the strange figure wiping the boards as usual, Nube creeps up behind them and almost startles Hiroshi. Nube goes in first to confirm his suspicions after making the students promise not to scream, and he lets them into the class to see the midnight honor student. Hiroshi is so scared he almost lets out a scream, but they all manage to finally stay composed and decide to have a midnight class with the honor student. Anyway, after letting the midnight dude have his fun, everybody informs the midnight student that it's time for an exorcism. The poor guy wonders like what's going to get exorcised, and Nube teaches about object souls and how they tend to find homes in human-shaped objects. He uses his spells to show them the soul of a doll that he has around, and everything starts to go haywire from there. They finally reveal to the midnight honor roll student that he's a doll, and then we finally see the full frame of the midnight honor student. It's like one of those dolls in a biological practical lab, and Nube goes the extra mile of showing the doll his real doll body. Now it throws a tantrum and runs away, but when it gets to the bathroom and sees its reflection in the mirror, it realizes they're telling the truth. Hiroshi tries to cheer it up by offering that maybe they should play a game first. Wrong move. The monster suddenly smashes the mirror, and Nube goes to the janitor's store to fetch the broom. Because he's so clumsy, he somehow gets himself locked inside, and that's when the midnight honor student grabs a piece of the broken shard and tells the children the game he's decided. They're gonna play tag, and he's going to peel off the skin from their bodies, and they will all look like him. Then no one will be able to say that he's a doll anymore. Wow, that got dark quickly. Well, I get it, there's power in numbers, but none of the kids have any ghosty powers like Nube does, or any psychic powers or exorcism powers or anything like that. So, considering he's the only expert, maybe don't bring the children. First off, why are we treating this ghost as like a real human being. Problems are showing up when Nube and his kids try to give human qualities to a non-human thing. Nube's viewing the doll soul like a human soul. No, you could have just stabbed it in the very beginning and have been done with it. Now he chases them around like a psycho-twisted murderer, and everybody decides to go into hiding. He chases them into the old school compound. Although Hiroshi locks the door, the monster breaks into the building from the window and finds them. He's about to stab them when Nube shows up and grabs him by the hand and immediately turns back into his soul form. And Nube forces him back into his doll body and tells him to pray to God because he wants to become a real boy. However, by the next morning, the human doll is gone and everybody blames Nube, and the principal even asks him to pay for it. But when they're going home after school, the doll finds Nube and the gang and announces that he has become a human just before disappearing forever. Now, a few days pass and Nube decides his luck by inviting Ritsuko to a zombie bar, and of course it doesn't go as planned. And that's not the only thing that doesn't go as planned, because this student of Nube's, Miki, is fascinated with having psychic powers, and this is why you don't tell everybody about your abilities. You get people who are interested and are gonna be dumb. You'll see what I mean. So Miki spends all her time investigating the supernatural, and then she finds a program that teaches how to gain psychic powers. So we see her following instructions of this thing and goes to bed, but wakes up tired, and Nube sends her to nap in the nurse's office, but she's useless. Now while she's sleeping, her neck extends out of her body. Now she takes it for a joke and heads to Nube's desk and learns the answers to her math test. But when she toys around with Ritsuko, Nube comes running and wakes her up from her dream. And when Kyoko and Hiroshi hear Ritsuko's description, they call the monster Rohuro Kube. Things get even more weird when Miki heads down back to class and finds the exact same questions that she just saw in her dream. And of course she's all excited. She used the opportunity to get perfect scores and it's great. And her dreams of getting famous on powers and using the night to torment all of her classmates, it's all great. But the next morning, everybody's thinking like she's a monster. And that's why when she gets to school, they accuse her of being like a creature. And Nube tries to talk to her, but she panics and runs away. This is what happens when you get too interested in the spiritual realm. Now Miki runs to a store and hides, but she falls asleep and her yokai neck grows long. When she sees herself in the mirror, she realizes she's exactly what they say she is. Nube shows up and starts chanting an incantation, but before he can finish, Miki pushes him out of the way and heads into the gym. Anyway, everyone sees her. They get defensive and decides that if they're gonna kill her, they're trying to figure that out. Now she's not gonna go out without a fight. But when Nube chases her into the store, her classmates rally around her and try to protect her, thinking Nube is about to kill her. But that's when he explains that she's not a monster. He shows them her head stuck in her neck and explains that she only looks that way because she's dreaming. After confirming that she's not a monster, she plays with her friends for a bit before Nube plunges his demon hand into her neck and restores her back to normal. Now after getting Miki, the spiritual realm obsessed nerd, out of this whole mess, things return to normal and they live happily ever after for a tiny bit. But eventually things get out of hand, literally. It all begins with Nube's student Katsuya takes his baby sister shopping, and when he sees the cost of the special item his sister wants, he realizes, oh shoot, that is way more than he can chew, so he goes to somebody about getting more money, and gosh, so dumb, he goes to an abandoned shrine, picks up a few coins to make up for the amount for his sister's meal, and Katsuya prays to the god in charge of the shrine and leaves. Big mistake, because the shrine actually doesn't belong to a god, it belongs to an evil sword spirit called Hatamonba, which is like sealed away from humanity. So the next day, everybody praises Katsuya for how much he loves his sister, but when they take a group picture, Katsuya notices that his head is missing. Katsuya starts to investigate the shrine. That's how Nube informs him the shrine belonged to an executioner's sword that was still hungry for blood. Miki adds that Hatamonba deliberately drops money in front of people who need it, so when they pick it up, they can cut off their necks as criminals. Now at this point, Katsuya's kind of figured out that it's going to be a matter of time before his neck goes flying too, and things get really serious because Hiroshi rushes inside, informs Katsuya that his little sister got cut by a wooden broom. Now Katsuya rushes to where she is, and sure enough, there's a blade slash on her neck. Now Katsuya tries to touch it, but it almost cuts his hand too, and later he tells Kyoko and Hiroshi the truth, that he picked money from this Hatamonba shrine. But when they make an even bigger mistake, because instead of going to Nube, the guy who actually can help them, they decide to return the money, because that's just that is such the thing you should do. What idiots. But guess what? This thing does not accept refunds, so a sword comes flying out and morphs into a demon, and it almost cuts off Katsuya's head. Everybody goes running. The monster doesn't let him go. It chases them down the mountain, and Katsuya has to serve as a decoy for Hiroshi and Kyoko to get Manami to safety. They all run back to school and finally tell Nube what's going on. So he sets up a quick barrier to keep the demon out for a bit. Now Nube goes to square off with this thing, but it pushes him out of the way. And that's when Katsuya decides to become a decoy to get the monster blade stuck in a spot. He uses a mirror to lure the monster to himself. And just as it gets stuck on a table, Nube finally gets a clean shot and he knocks the monster out with his demon fist and returns it back into the scabbard. They take it back to the shrine and lock it up for good, but they're going to need the blade very soon, and they will be forced to unlock it again. Meanwhile, these train officers encounter a bizarre sight while traveling. A girl suddenly rushes into the train tracks and gets half crushed by the train. train, and one of the officers steps out to see what's going on and get help. But by the time he gets back, his partner of the train is dead. There's blood everywhere, and this little incident is what started a myth. The ghost girl that is still searching for her legs. Back in Nube's school, this kid, Makoto, is busy watching Power Rangers Online, great show, when a strange dude shows up like an unblockable ad and starts talking about this thing. And he warns that if Makoto doesn't become a paid subscriber to his YouTube channel, he'll never get the secret chant to chase away this girl, because she'll be coming for his legs in 3 days. Big problem, Makoto's a proper scaredy cat, so he believes the dude and starts living in fear of this thing. The next day, Makoto asks Nube and his classmates to tell him the chant, but Nube brushes it off, and that's why Makoto almost dies. After interrupting class and spreading mass paranoia around the school, Nube tries to dissuade Makoto's mind, but that doesn't work. After Makoto runs away, Nube informs Kyoko and Hiroshi that this thing is actually real, but she reacts to fear, and that's why he's trying to dissuade Makoto from thinking about her. But now, he's practically a beacon. He tells them the real story, and now they have to think of a way to protect Makoto because his fear is definitely going to draw her in. Well, easier said than done. We know Makoto's afraid of this thing. You gotta get to the root source of the fear and exterminate it. He believes the only way to survive this thing is by knowing the secret phrase, so why don't you just give him a freaking secret server? Give him a phrase! Anything! Nube only needed to pay for the subscription for Makoto, enable him to watch the video where the YouTuber releases the real phrases, and with it, look at that, his mind's calmed down because he's got the phrases, whether they work or not, doesn't matter. Nube's right there. Maybe you should bring legal charges against the YouTuber for fraud, extortion, or whatever. Look, Makoto came to Nube for the phrase first, right? Nube's some sort of like a psychic specialist, spiritualist, so whatever phrase Nube gives him, there's a high chance Makoto would have believed him. He could even given him something a little semi-real with a little bit oomph behind it. Read out some sort of safe protection spell. 2 functions. He'll stop thinking about this ghosty chick who's searching for her legs, and he can protect himself. It's a win-win. Anyway, Nube's not as smart as me, so he lets Makoto go home unprotected, and when he gets home, he gets some work done, or he tries to, but while he's working on his stuff, this thing shows up. Now, luckily, Nube and the gang are just outside, and it appears under his table and grabs his leg, and that's when Makoto makes a run for it, but just when he opens the door, she grabs him again, and Nube rushes into the house, and that's when Makoto asks him for the spell. Nube tells him to ask the spirit, so then he uses his demon hand like a transponder and makes it possible for Makoto to communicate, and that's when Makoto learns that she can't rest in peace because people like him are afraid of her, so he promises don't be afraid of her, and then she leaves, but then she heads over to the home of the YouTuber and serves him like some poetic justice because our hungry YouTuber doesn't know a spell that can like protect him from the real thing. So kind of harmless, but still spooky. Now the next day things get even more weird. Nube's wife goes find him. Apparently he's engaged to be married, and it's none other than this beautiful chick. But problem, she's kind of like an ice monster. Everybody notices that there's like something wrong when winter starts showing up in summer. Now Nube's mind does not go to his fiancee until she shows up in school. And just when Miki and his students are making fun of him for his poor relationship life, Yukime shows up and introduces herself as his fiancée. Now she drags Nube out on a date and makes everything cold wherever they go. Turns out, Nube rescued her from a hunter when she was younger, and she promised to marry him when she grew older, except, that to marry him, she would have to, freeze him to death, and that's the only way to keep their lovers eternal in their village. Wow. So Nube finally tells her off after their date, and she throws a tantrum, tries to fight with him. Nube holds back because, he's kind of a softie. But when she, is about to freeze him up, Hiroshi shows up. They try to stop her. She gets mad and tries to take them out. Now Nube gets serious now. He unfreezes himself and stands in her way, and he warns her that he won't let her go if anything happens to him. And then when she sees how serious he is, she gives up and goes away, but promises to return later. Great. So he's got an icy, ghosty chick. When they get back to school, Akira, another of Nube's students, decides it's his turn to be a demon idiot. He's an inventor with a really cool brain, but that is until he comes in touch with a special tab in the junk of his favorite materials shop. The owner gives him this thing for free, and that's when everything changes. When he gets home, he turns on the tab and starts typing "Please respond, comrades." The next day, Akira brings the school's rabbit, Shiro, to class and shows off his latest invention, and now it's a device that lets animals talk human language. After that, he invents a football device that scores goals irrespective of how the ball is kicked, except there's something wrong with the device. The ball smashes into Nube's face, and he takes the device, and then he notices there's something wrong with it. Nube tries to confirm that Akira made the thing, but Akira says he did, and Nube believes him. But that evening, Akira competes with Nube for the first person to find a spirit with his latest invention. Surprisingly, beats Nube to it, but after squandering Nube's money on Robin, he heads home and starts to work on a new invention with his talking tab. By morning, they find Shiro dead, and that's when Akira gets the bright idea to try and resurrect the dead rabbit. He toys with his tab, and the tab encourages him to start to create a device, and he brings the device to school. They think he's joking, but he takes the students and his new robot device to Shiro's gravesite. Gets to work. The robot pulls out Shiro's soul and fuses it into the robot, and the girls finally arrive where Nube is inspecting the item he seized from Akira, and they report Akira's new target to him. We all know how important it is, alright? But dang, has anybody forgotten, like Terminator, RoboCop? We already know this is gonna end badly for Akira. His tech never works for long. So if we're gonna survive, we gotta figure out how we're gonna do this and deal with this life-giving robot. Because it's gonna go sentient and then it's gonna decide what it's gonna wanna do one day, and probably world domination. And no, we're not gonna have a robot from the future to save us. You need 3 things: duct tape, screwdrivers, and some willing muscle. Akira's obsessed with his creations. There's no way you're gonna destroy a robot here without some reactions from Akira. And honestly, we don't even need Nube for this one. Everyone knows that bringing a dead person back from the dead takes supernatural power. So either Akira's been touched by God, or he's been dabbling into the mystic arts or some sort of necromancy type stuff. Now with this in mind, let Akira lead us to the gravesite where he wants to perform his miracle, and once he brings out the robot, Katsuya would quickly grab him from behind, hold him down for 1, while some of the other students tape his mouth and hands, and then we all attack the robot together. It's not yet sentient. We still have advantage. You gotta act fast. The robot was created to resurrect the dead, not fight. You grab it, use all of your screwdrivers, destroy the crap out of the thing, just stab at the joints, then call Nube to seal the deal before you send Akira to counseling and maybe some sort of like prison for the kind of robots that he was creating. Now, things go wrong because Shiro's soul starts disappearing. The robot suddenly declares that it needs more soul juice to keep Shiro's soul around, and it grabs some of Akira's classmates and starts siphoning their soul to keep the machine going. And Akira has no way to control or stop it. Akira tries to talk to it, but that doesn't work. And just when he's about to get drained dry too, Nube shows up and tears the machine up after sensing a sinister energy coming from its core. Now Nube destroys the machine in one hit and Shiro's soul floats away. After that, Nube gets Akira to confess to everything. Turns out the tab is filled with the souls of ancient scientists who are looking for a way to surpass death. That's why they yielded their consciousness to the tab to control the future and inventions for as long as possible. Now with Nube's device, Akira throws the machine away and it's bye-bye ancient evil scientists. Later, Nube goes and gets some groceries because he's broke, and he tries to cheat the system by using his demon hand to pick the right grocery store, but the owner catches him. And when he's done, he heads home, but he falls on the way. But that's when he sees this cute girl. Now the others can't see her, so they think he's talking to a pole. He gives her a treat because he knows she's a happiness spirit. But after he leaves her, she follows him to school and spreads happiness to everybody, and it's wonderful. But Nube doesn't really realize what's going on, because then his students suddenly have an unending streak of good luck. So what does he do? Well, obviously, he cuts off the good luck charm. He sends this thing away, but she gets sad and, leaves. But when Hiroshi almost gets crushed by a falling building, she saves him and then runs away. Now later, Makoto reports there's a strange girl in his house, and that's when Nube tells everybody about her. They head down to Makoto's place, but when she sees Nube, she runs out and heads to a house where they find a picture of a dead girl that looks just like her. Nube does some digging. He finds out that she's the spirit of a dead girl, and that's when he decides to throw a party with the students. And during the party, he brings out Mom's astral body and lets them see each other and say their goodbyes, and it's really cute. And after that, she's so happy, she leaves the house and heads down to a new location. Now the next evening, the spiritual magnetic force goes crazy, and while it's busy doing its thing, this weird-looking servant girl grabs a split skull and uses the spiritual force to join in back together. Now as soon as it gets joined, Crazy Fox Doctor is back. She calls him Master Tamamo, but instead of thanking her for reviving him, he scolds her and sends her on her way. Then he heads back towards Nube's school because he has unfinished business. Now elsewhere, lightning strikes on shards of glass and a spiritual portal opens just enough to allow a drop of spiritual ghoul land on like this poor dog. And this is the reason why lots of Nube's students are gonna get sick. Nube is shocked later next day at school when he sees Tamamo in the staff office. Now before walking out, Tamamo informs him that he's no longer interested in Hiroshi. He's found a far more interesting toy. And Tamamo poses as a doctor and carries out routine checkups on students. Now Nube is forced to worry and focus on him all the time. Now back in class, all the girls are fawning over him, but Kyoko and Hiroshi are worried about what his true aim will be and how long it's gonna take for him to reveal it. Now when Nube is out of class, Tamamo shows up and tries to get info about Nube from the students, but all they can tell him is that Nube's goofy. When he asks about the demon hand, Miki imitates Nube, but Tamamo's not satisfied. And when Nube shows up again, Tamamo has to cut his investigation short. Now Nube follows him out, and Tamamo explains that his kin existed only to undergo their humanification and cause havoc to humans. Except after being defeated by Nube, Tamamo has gotten interested in Nube. Nube tries to attack him, but he tells him that they're under a temporary truce, and while they're busy messing around, the spiritual goo that landed on the dog explodes and a dark fog starts flowing out of it. At the same time, Tamamo decides the best way to review Nube's abilities is to force him to act. That's why he surrounds Nube's students with fire, and he fortunately is forced to reveal more of what he can do. He uses his sealing paper to protect the students, push the flames back, and Tamamo is impressed and gets serious by using his full flame. But even then, Nube bests him by putting all of his force into his arm, and he sends Tamamo flying. After confirming that his students are safe, he rushes to finish off Tamamo. But that's when when both of them notice a spiritual fog, and Tamamo immediately draws Nube's attention to a giant tadpole swimming in the fog, and warns Nube that if it's going to be left alone, all the students will die. It starts shooting out the same gooish substance that it created and creates multiple nesting grounds on the body of Nube's students. Nube tries to slash it, but it disappears and immediately regenerates. The entire school gets covered in smoke, and the principal helps usher the students into the school building while Nube has to stay and figure out how to destroy this thing. Now Nube gives up on slashing the monster and tries to restrain it with his chanting scrolls, but the monster burns through the scrolls like they're nothing. After that, it rushes into the direction of the students and pours some goo on Kyoko. Now Nube gets really mad. He pulls out some Spider-Man acrobatics and cuts up the monster thoroughly, but even then it just keeps regenerating. Nube heads up to where the students are, and they are in serious pain, and the monster's eggs are fused with the astral body of the students. And he can't slash it without potentially harming his students' astral bodies. And that's when Tamamo warns him that the sun will soon set, and then it would really be good night for all of his students. After that, Nube comes up with a plan to go fishing. Tamamo actually helps him figure out that since the creature is strongest in the fog, the only way to kill it is to drag it out into where the sunlight would hit it. But to do that, he's going to need a very big net. Look, Nube's knowledge of spiritual things should have made it a little bit more privy to how abnormal the psychic occurrences in the school are. Like, this is not normal. With his knowledge, he should have started researching stronger spells. Like, we see the standard stuff. Why does he not think about improving his hardware, improving his spells, improving his abilities? But now that he's in this mess, he's got to figure out what he's gonna do. Like, his thinking is way too linear. He thinks he can only get the creature by dragging it out into the sun. Well, you're not thinking all that clearly, Nube. All you gotta do is make the sun shine over the field again. So how about this? Get a whole bunch of fans or reflectors or mirrors. You got giant fans from the school assembly halls. Blow a path through the fog by turning on the fans, maximum output, let the breeze do its thing. Then you got the mirrors. Full on direct sunlight, or can it be reflected sunlight? Again, you'll find out this is helpful information. You can see how it responds. If it starts to get repelled, great. Then he would have had help from the students and all the sunlight being reflected on the creature, and he would have had an easier time in taking this thing out. Now Nube gets all the available students to gather nets for him, and he takes some time to enchant the net to be able to hold the creature. And once he's done, he goes diving into the fog, to go fishing. Now the creature wakes up from its siesta, and Nube shows why he might be really unlucky. Because at the same time, Hiroshi is cooking elsewhere, because Kyoko's life is on the line, and he's smart enough to figure out that Nube might not be able to do this on his own, so he goes to his fated enemy, Tamamo, for help. Hiroshi makes a smart case by arguing that since Tamamo is interested in Nube, he has to help Nube, because if the students die, Nube would lose his motivation, and his demon power would probably lose its power. And all the students get motivated and join in begging Tamamo for help, and the black-hearted fox simply just walks away. Now, Nube's having a hard time getting the creature into the net because it starts moving, and instead it just starts regenerating instantly, and then Hiroshi and the guys decide to be useful and pull the net from the outside, making it easy for Nube to carry out his plan. And at the same time, Tamamo changes into his fox form, because, despite how he looks on the outside, he really is actually like a softie, surprisingly. He joins the fray and uses his demon fire to push the creature in the right direction towards the sunlight. Tamamo uses the field, basically turning into a sea of flames, and the students pull their net, and Nube finally gets the creature out into the sun, and once it's in the sun, Nube does his thing, slice and dice, and the creature goes away. But once he's done, all the gestating eggs on the students dry up and disappear, thankfully. And later, Nube shows up to thank Tamamo and tell him his secret. Nube reveals that he gets his powers from the trust his students place in him, like a Dominic Toretto. After the storm passes, the children arrive at school the next day, and then they notice something wrong. Nube's gone. They play it off because Ritsuko, shows up and gives them like a shabby explanation about him being sick. But when he doesn't show up the next day after, or the day after that, Kyoko and Hiroshi get worried. That's when Miki sneaks into the staff room and hear lectures talking about Nube's situation, how it's more serious than a mere cold. Now, we see Katsuya's sister claiming that she saw a demon in the school's old building. Nube's students decide that in his absence, their job is to take care of business. And that evening, Hiroshi and the gang head out, over to the old building just in time to catch the principal leaving, and they walk around into this dark room and they find Nube hiding in the dark. When they turn on the light, they find out that he's been possessed by a demon, and he explains they went to take care of a stubborn demon, but the girl's parents got careless during the exorcism, and thanks to their stupidity, the demon got stuck on his demon hand. Now, the demon is on his demon hand, and Nube can't exorcise the demon, so he's stuck as a half demon. Now, the students hear this and decide to help him because he saved them so much. Kati comes up with a bright idea to cut off the demon using Hatamonba. So they go to get the sword, but they can't activate it because none of them did anything wrong. And Hiroshi pretends to steal Nube's property just to make the demon show up and chase him. And then Nube uses the opportunity to chant a spell that protects his astral body, and one of the greatest maxing out of luck stats of all time, they manage to cut off the monster without harming Nube's astral body. Nube wakes up, immediately uses his demon hand to destroy the monster, and helps them, sheath the thing again. After that, they all head home, but that's when Nube notices that something's wrong. Now, he can't tell his students this, but he knows that something dangerous is coming their way very soon.